That was real. Josh's fart was real. It was. It was. That was the third take, and he knew he had one. And Billy almost died. Like it was literally, we walked into the trailer and the camera people were crying tears.
You took my first question.
It was real.
Thank you.
We got to get this going. Robert Rodriguez is coming in 28 minutes, so we got to get this going. We got to move.
Moving on to the important first questions. So that was the GAD guarantee.
That was the GAD guarantee. I will destroy you. Billy said he had to turn on the running water just to smell something different.
What I love so much about the show is that how much every episode is different. So this one obviously was like a spoof on all those great reality shows. How much fun are you guys having doing that?
A lot?
Yeah, it was great.
A fair amount. No, yeah, Larry had the idea. He was like, I really just think them going to Griffith Park is going to be funny. I don't know what they'll be doing. I just feel like night vision goggles and them in Griffith Park will be funny. And then, as usually happens in the comedians, I did all the work of making it a story. You know, but it was really fun. It was our hardest night of shooting by far because we were there till like 5 a.m. Because we couldn't start until. I'm looking at Joe Dishner, who we had like 1,000,000 5 a.m. nights on The Good Guys 5 years ago in Dallas. But yeah, it's great. We challenge ourselves to make each episode different, and it's a much higher degree of difficulty, but it's also more gratifying when it works.
You're also working with some great improv actors. So how much of that was scripted and how much of that was improv? How much do you let them play? With all due respect, of course, to you guys as brilliant writers that you are.
In that one or in general?
Let's start with that one and then let's go in general.
I feel like that one was fairly close to the script, believe it or not. In every episode, there's always room for improv. They especially when Larry's directing, there's sort of just an unwillingness to call cut. And so, when the script ends, the actors are just sort of sitting there in front of the cameras, and they got to keep the scene going. And both of the guys are really great at that. So there's a certain amount of just playfulness that imbues into the scenes. But yeah, I think that one was fairly scripted, believe it or not. The stuff in the middle where they were just doing like the slow-mo and that stuff, that was all them. That was just like, just play for a minute. And then I think there was some stuff. So there was some, we always try to go in with jokes on the page to make sure that they don't get nervous.
I think it's fair to say that there are runs in the shows, like the Mel Brooks episode. Pretty much everything Billy did with Mel Brooks was more or less improv. Mm-hmm. And they'll go into chunks of improv at any one time, but the majority of the show is scripted. So
that was a Herculean effort by our editor, Steve Lang, to make that the Mel Brooks scene. I don't know if you guys saw that episode. It's Billy goes to Mel Brooks' office, and we had a script for it, but it's, well, first of all, you're not really going to tell Mel Brooks, like, no, you kind of missed the line. It's like he's going to say what he's going to say, and it was a very freewheeling conversation between the two gentlemen that then Steve Lang had to make into a scene, which he did, and it was really an amazing thing to watch in the editing room, how he kind of took what was probably 20 minutes worth of stuff and turned it into 3 or 4 minutes of coherent.
I can't wait for the DVD
talk.
extras.
Oh, it's
that's relevant. Like the first cut of the pilot was how long? It was
48 minutes.
Yeah, 48 minutes for a 22-minute show.
Yeah. But also, like, you hear that and you're like, your instinct would be for panic to set in. When you hear 48 minutes, you're like, oh, we're gonna have to go to the network and ask them if we can do an hour long. It's just like, and then you watch it and you're like, oh no, I can get 26 minutes out of that. Like, it's not, because there were just these long runs that were hilarious on the set, but when you watch it as an episode, you're like, oh, this is too long for a reason.
Well, full disclosure, my first instinct was to say, we just shot 2 episodes for the price of 1. Can we have all of the money that we were going to spend, and then we could spend it on stuff we like? So.
But, to be fair, your second instinct was murder-suicide.
We're all glad you did it.
Yeah. And we're like, stick with your first instinct.
I always mix those up, murder-suicide.
Sure. Get a lot of money, murder-suicide.
Plan B. What I love, too, is how Billy and Josh's chemistry has evolved. Can you talk about that?
They actually grew to actually like each other.
Amazing as that is.
Until that scene in the trailer at the end, and then they really didn't like each other. No, the thing that at least makes me laugh about our show is that Josh knows what pushes Billy's buttons, and he does it because he knows that's where the comedy of the show comes from, is just a general sense of it'll be funny if I annoy Billy Crystal. And he likes touching his face, and Billy hates having his face touched. And there's just a lot of invasion of personal space that goes on with Josh. And he's just like he's like a puppy dog of a Saint Bernard puppy dog of a guy. And Billy's a very controlled. He knows how he wants to approach it. And we obviously felt like we had to incorporate that dynamic into the show because they're playing themselves, and it is genuine. I mean, you'll see moments in the show where Billy will just be like, "Why do you have to say that?" And it's like clearly it was not a scripted thing that Josh just there's one in the birthday episode where he's like, "Yeah, you just found a cup of cum," and he's talking about like having been a sperm donor or something like that, and Billy's just like, "Oh," and it's genuine. That's Billy's actual. I mean, some of us are delighted by that, but Billy is genuinely horrified by it, and it's very funny to watch.
Has there been anything that Billy has said no to that you've just pushed it too far with him?
Actually, I'll say the best thing is Billy will like get something and then basically say like, absolutely not, I will never do this. Here are the reasons I will never do this. This is a terrible thing. And basically like it's a thing, and Ben will talk to him and everything. And then inevitably they get to the set and he does it. Not only does he do it, like he does it way further than it was actually written on the page. And it's just sort of, at first it was kind of scary because it was like, Billy's not going to do the episode. We have to call the network. And then later it was like, oh no, he'll do it. You just have to like talk to him about it. I mean, is that fair?
Yeah, a lot of these episodes are the product of just me apologizing a lot, and then he just does it eventually. No, I mean, there are. There's a moment in an episode coming up where he kind of has to like do an expletive-laden tirade about a little kid who may or may not be dying of cancer, and it's like, he reads that and he doesn't want to do it. But then the tirade was just so much worse than anything I wrote when we finally did it. And it was hilarious, and I mean, he really once he's on board, he's really on board, and it's fun to watch. I don't mind apologizing a little bit. It's it's fine.
Let's talk about. Oh, what about FX? Because you also kind of send up the network.
Well, they're standing right there. Hi, John.
John's fine with it.
He's a big man. He will physically manhandle us if we say the wrong thing. No, they've been amazing. We literally probably the one thing we had to ask as a favor was in the pilot stage. We knew it was going to be a show about the making of a show, and the idea was like, is it going to be at the network? It's like when we refer to the network, will it just be, the network says, and we were like, please let us just say it's FX, because there's a certain meta level that
Absolutely.
makes it funnier and more specific and more fun, and they were great sports, and they
we explained to John Landgraf, the president, that the president would not be John Landgraf. I mean, it would be a different guy, totally, and he would not be named John Landgraf. And then we just cast an actor who looks just like John Landgraf. And also acts like him.
We did offer the role to him first.
Yeah, no, we
did.
It's his fault for turning it
He
down.
passed. Yeah. Yeah.
I would love to hear you talk about how you put an episode together, because there are also these. It's such an intricate puzzle. There are all those set pieces. There's the show. There's the show within a show. It's almost so incredibly meta. So how do you even begin to sort of do that when you sit there in the writers' room?
The short answer is they're all different. Like, as the episodes are all different, the process is different for each one, which is a little bit harrowing because when you make TV, you kind of want to have like a little bit of a sense of there's an assembly line or there's quality control going in, and we have we have a different approach to each episode. We try to serve the story that we're trying to tell and then work backwards from there. We had a writer's room for literally 12 weeks in the spring, and then we sent all the writers home, and I did a lot of writing over the summer, and then most of the scripts were written by the time we went to production, but not all of them were. That's an example of one that we threw together quickly while we were in production, and we had learned a couple of things about the way the guys work together. But yeah, I think Billy and Larry have both been instrumental in just making sure we don't tell the same story over and over again. I think that in the birthday episode, which I don't know if you guys saw, but there's a moment of like real genuine emotion on Billy's part that I think the idea of doing something emotional came from him. I had something on the page that was that, but much shorter, and he was like, I think I can really go there this time, and that is kind of exhilarating when you're making a comedy that you can take 3 or 4 minutes off of trying to get laughs and just have this really genuine emotional moment, and I think it worked really, really well.
I would just say the process on this, and I don't think Ben would say this of himself, but having been in the writer's room, it was a little unusual in that I think the process amounted to, for each episode, let's write all possible variations on this episode. Let's just write, okay, maybe there are 30 ways of doing this episode. Let's write all 30. And then, by which I mean Ben, for any one episode, you'd write sometimes 4 or 5 scripts. It was like...
You're just trying to get on my good side because you just made me walk to fucking Starbucks, and it's 120 degrees outside, and I'm wearing a jacket.
Yeah.
But who bought?
He's also so handsome.
This is going really well. I'm liking this panel quite a bit.
Do the guys contribute?
We do. We were roommate. I don't know. We were roommates 20 years ago. We went to UCLA together, and we have no. I'm serious. We know each other that long. So this has been, Joe sitting there and produced The Good Guys, which was the first show we worked on together that Matt created, and this was another opportunity for us to work together. And it's really, other than the Starbucks, which I am fucking pissed about. The
I feel like I'm conducting a therapy session.
No, it's fine. No, but it's really cool because
I bought you a green tea.
That's true.
I totally
It
bought
was
you
a
green tea.
tall.
Latte, please. That's okay. It's fine. You're moderating. It's fine.
You're just moderating 5 panels here at ATX. Debra Birnbaum, ladies and gentlemen.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Let me know if you get sick of me later. I'm going to be sick of the sound of my own voice. I'm just going to ask random questions about other shows. It's fine.
Ask them about our show and if
Yes.
they've ever seen it.
I'll bring it up later. Did the guys contribute ideas from their own lives? I was wondering
Yeah.
specifically about the charity episode. Did that come from them?
The idea, well, Billy, I remember we were doing a mix, and Billy, I think asked him, you're like, how many charity events requests do you get a week? And he's like, it was a huge number. It was like...
Well, actually, I really wanted to do a charity episode, so that I don't know
Okay.
if I ever said this, but I was like,
Yeah.
I actually kind of asked that, sort of planting the seed. But I remember he came into the writer's room also and talked about really liking to do the doodles. Sometimes they'll do, for a charity, Billy Crystal will be asked to do a little drawing and sign it, and then we'll auction it off or whatever. And he
What
liked
would you
doing
pay
that.
for something like that?
So.
Like more than $100? Raise your hand if you'd pay more than $100 for... Yeah, nobody.
Right.
It makes no sense.
Exactly, yeah.
Why would you pay
It's
$100
for the
for
children.
a
Why
Billy
are you
Crystal
holding
drawing?
back?
He's not a good drawer. That's not what he's known for. He actually is a good drawer. Yeah, and the one where they were both nominated for Josh's nominated for Frozen and Billy's nominated for Monsters Inc. That really happened. They both had nominations for the Annie, and it was a really funny thing to watch them walk into the room the next morning, and Billy was like, "You're totally gonna win," and it was like, and which was true, by the way. Josh did win, but just watching 2 guys nominated for the same award seemed like the jumping off point for an episode, and it is specific to our show. It's very that could only happen with Billy Crystal and Josh Gad, who are guys who are known for doing voices in animated shows. So and that became the jumping off point to a larger thing. But yeah, that's from their own life.
It also doesn't seem like you're afraid of tackling tough issues, like the race episode. Sorry, that was.
Oh no, we're afraid.
But you just go in it boldly, don't you?
That was a really good example of an episode, and there were a lot of different versions of that episode, and that's an episode that you can do really, really wrong.
Most of them were incredibly racist. Ben was working- yeah.
When we decided to take the anti-tack on racism, it got better. While we were
Such an edgy idea, though, for a racism show.
No, I know, but no, that's a I think there's a certain that comes from stuff we think about in making television all the time, which is how to get more diversity in the show, and it was a little bit of us laughing at ourselves for four white guys sitting around a table talking about this show, and it was we didn't really intend to be four white guys. You know what I mean? Like we just sort of were born that way, and then we wanted to sort of send up the fact that guilty white liberals talking about race is a minefield and potentially really funny. And it's like guys with good intentions who wind up doing the wrong thing. Seemed like an area for an episode. I'm sure I'm in trouble right now.
I'm not going to look at Josh.
Yeah, Debra just started looking like down. Yeah, no, but that was a really fun one to shoot. And Afian Crockett, who played Ron in that episode, is just a hilarious actor and a friend of Josh's, and he brought the character to life, which really helped.
What were some particularly challenging moments for you? What were some particular, and how did you get through them?
There's an episode coming up where, and I don't want to spoil it, but Josh says something about Billy that, and the way that episode is engineered is such that it has to be something really, really hurtful. And and this is the real Billy Crystal you're writing for and writing about, and so and it wouldn't have the episode wouldn't have worked if Josh was sitting with his friends saying sometimes he just tries too hard, or he cares too much. It had to be a really genuinely hurtful thing. And when Billy read the first draft of that script, it actually hurt me in the heart, because he was like, "Is that what you guys think of me?" And we're like, "No, we revere you. You're a legend." And there was this. It was very hard talking through the process of and he understood it on a rational level, and he's a writer and a director in his own right. He knows what these, he knows why it was written that way. It's just that he's reading somebody talking shit about him, actual him, and it was, it's impossible for that moment not to feel hurtful. And then what it winds up being is this incredibly, I think, powerful episode about you don't get to. You don't get to talk that way about your friends, and so that was a really tough moment. I hope I haven't spoiled it, but that was a challenging thing.
Matt, what
Just
about
real
for
quick,
you?
the other side of it was having to talk about the fact that if the thing that is said is too mild, then Billy appears thin-skinned, and it's actually worse for him.
Yeah.
Right.
And so what was nice about that was it actually, ultimately, as difficult as it was, it did get at a real thing about comedy, which is if you've come to the point where you really take yourself that seriously, you're kind of done. You can't do comedy at a certain level anymore. And Billy actually says that in the episode. And so, yeah, it's when you talk about meta.
And it's a really great performance by him, and it wouldn't have been as great if the stuff wasn't as raw as it was. We're very inspired by Louis, and we would watch all of us would watch it every week, and then we'd come in and we'd talk about it the next morning, and just the way that Louis makes himself so kind of emotionally vulnerable on that show was something that we very much aspire to, and I think we probably do more straight up jokes than Louis does. We're a little bit, but I think he sort of delves into the emotion a little more often than we do, but we try to do it, and we try to do it, and we try to be true to those emotions, and that was an example of that.
Well, it's, I can appreciate where you guys are coming from, because you have to strike that balance of, they're playing versions of themselves, but it is still Billy Crystal playing Billy Crystal. Can you talk about that from Josh Gad's perspective as well?
I think Josh tweeted something. He's like, "I swear I'm not this big of a douchebag in real life," which is true.
Yeah, he's not.
He's not that big.
Close.
No, he's amazing. Not at all. They're both really courageous to be doing this. I think. I don't think a lot of. It adds an added degree of difficulty to be sort of you're not playing a character named Schmilly Schmistel. You're actually the guy, and he's very aware of are people going to think that this is how I am? Are people going to think this is how I talk to the PA that I work with, or and I think it's just a fine line to walk, but the fact that those guys are up for it makes it a lot easier, I think, and the fact that Josh actually has gas on command also makes it a lot easier.
It's a talent.
Yeah, but no, I don't know.
I also think it's fair to say that Josh, whose public persona is a little bit lesser known than Billy's, has a little bit more freedom to play, to do the more extreme things, right? And Billy kind of
But also
needs
more to
play it-
lose, kind of.
Yeah, more to
because
lose, yeah,
Since
exactly.
he's unformed, people might tune in and be like, this guy's terrible.
Yeah,
You know,
yeah, exactly. So I think it's sometimes it was a balance where Josh would be like, well, I don't know that if Billy's going to be playing like really Billy, I don't know that I want to go quite that far in playing somebody who people might think is really Josh. But that said, I mean, he was incredibly brave and willing to do, pretty much everything. So.
And I feel like we have to give a shout out to their fantastic supporting cast. I mean,
Oh my
Stephanie Weir
God.
is just brilliant.
Yeah. She, I don't know if you guys saw the pilot, but there's a moment where her stomach growls, and then they just kind of keep improving the scene, and that was real. Like, she just had a mic sitting here, and her stomach actually growled, and then she just kind of says, like, "Oh, I'm so hungry." Like, and it was just like this very, it was just this unbelievable. And then there's a moment later, also improv by her, where she's sort of like practice talking to a man she hasn't seen in many years, and she's sitting in her car alone. She's talking to the rearview mirror, and she's like, "Oh yeah, no, I lost 70 pounds. I had a
was
stomach
improv?
virus and just ran with it." And she like does this thing with her shoulder, and it's like coquettish, and it's just she's unbelievably hilarious. And Matt Oberg and Megan Ferguson, who just had a baby, Megan the PA. Just had a baby 2 nights ago.
Mazel tov.
Mazel tov to her. We don't know if it's a boy or a girl. Anything. Could be anything.
It's a baby.
Yeah, from her, it could be anything. And
It's a
yeah.
protein shake.
Oh my God, that's not whey. And yeah, and there's so much support on our set, and there's just a really playful, kind of, for lack of a better way of putting it, just chill vibe there. You know what I mean? It's like there's not a lot of, none of us are dear about the words, and we very much encourage everybody to just put it in your own voice and make it work as a scene, and it's just fun. It's the hardest I've ever laughed on a set by far.
But that's just on those two actors. Like, when you think about the challenge of saying, I mean, in the case of her in the car, that was literally, that scene wasn't particularly planned. We weren't going to do it. And then it was, oh, hey, Stephanie, how about if we go down to the garage and we'll point a camera at you, and then you talk to yourself for 20 minutes. Just go, talk to yourself for 20 minutes, try to make it really funny. No one else is in the scene with you, right? And she just does it, right? And then actually Matt Oberg on the pilot, when there was a whole thing that, like, how much was...
We were going to cut away to, like, I'm trying to do some more stand-up and get in front of the camera more, and we just cut to him doing stand-up, and he's like, so the Ottoman Empire, right? Like,
But it was
used
literally...
to be an empire, and now it's like a piece of furniture. And it's like, and he's just like, yeah, for 10 minutes, like...
To say to a guy like, okay, just go in front of an audience about this large and do stand-up and suck for 20 minutes in a really funny way, it's such a challenge
He's
as
like,
an actor.
What else? It was so funny. Stephanie also had a thing in the car, which didn't wind up in the show, where she goes, I'm working on a country western album. It's called Hwine Country with an H. And we're just like, where does this come from? And she's like, no, I actually think about stuff like that.
We just have 5 minutes left, so I want to give you guys a chance to ask some questions if you guys have any. Go ahead.
Write and make it look like it's improv because you said it's mostly written, and I was kind of shocked.
The actors are really good, is the short answer. I mean, it's the stuff that's scripted, they can make, they really just own the characters, and they're such naturalistic actors that even the stuff that's written, I don't think you can tell the difference between the stuff that's written and the stuff that's improv, with a few exceptions. But yeah, I've been asked many times, like, that had to have been improv, and it's like, no, it was on the script, or vice versa. That had to have been scripted. It was so sort of like tightly worded and like exactly right and on story, and it's like, nope, Josh just came up with that, or Billy or Stephanie. They have this ability to sort of have words come out of their mouth that sound, like that couldn't have just occurred to you, but also to perform stuff that was written as though it just occurred to them. They're just good.
But also in the category of things that I say to make up for the Starbucks run.
Yeah, still.
It does help.
Drying off, by the way.
It does help to have the two actors in the writer's room. Like, it was such a long process of running up to the pilot that, like, you knew their voices really well. So,
Yeah.
I mean, Ben can definitely write a line that sounds just like either of them.
Yeah, like here's Billy. Ah, Billy.
It's uncanny. It's like
And then
he's sitting
like
right
Josh
here.
is more like John Josh.
That was amazing.
And there's a subtle difference. Those sound the same.
Eerie, absolutely eerie.
Yeah, it's dead on. It was like you were watching the show. Just
Yes. In the front row. Go ahead.
Can you talk about how the show came to be? Like, was this a pitch? Was this only with Josh and Billy? Like, whose idea was it? Like, it seems...
It was a Swedish show initially called Olvesen and Herngren, or Herngren. I can't remember the order of the names.
A lot of Olvesen and Herngren fans here? No?
Who likes umlauts? There were several. There was a producer named Mikkel Bondesen and Henrik Basten, two producers, two guys. They have different names. And they sent us this show, and I think Mikkel sent it to me, and I said, this would be fun to do with Matt, having come off of the really fun experience of doing The Good Guys together. At the same time, they had sent it to Billy, and he became attached as a star and an executive producer. Around the same time, it had been sent to Larry, who became attached as a director and executive producer, and then we pitched it to a small handful of cable networks, and we went with FX. This is the quick answer, but yeah, that's how it happened.
I was hoping you could talk about those 4 or 5 scripts you're writing each episode. What about it, when you got it for each episode, when you found the thing, was there any, how did you know, I guess, or was there any element you found that, oh, when I got this in the script, I know it's going to work? And was it always the last script you wrote that was the
Yeah, and it wasn't, by the way, he's overstating it. It wasn't 4 or 5 for every one of them. Sometimes it was 1, and you would just, swap out a scene or something like that. There were towards the end, actually, we got really good at sort of knowing what felt like a comedian's episode, and then it was just sort of like kind of.
Also, sometimes those restarts were earlier in the process.
Yeah.
So you'd sort of break out an episode, you'd have a story, you'd have all the beats, and then
throw it out.
Throw that out.
Yeah.
So you're not actually writing.
Literally, I mean, it would just be like, oh, we just worked. I mean, I'm not making a joke. It would be like, we worked for a week on this, and then, somebody was like, nah, and then you're like, oh, it's dead. It's so dead. And that happens. It just happens.
I mean, actually, I think this is okay to talk about. One of the hardest things was we wrote an episode for Robin Williams, and
Yeah.
he was going to be in it, and then,
That was very
horrible.
tough.
That
That
was
was very tough. That was, we were obviously like, I think as fans, everybody was hit by that. And then we also had this, our first thought was like, oh my God, our friend Billy just lost his best friend. And it was terrible. It was right before we went into production. It was just really sad. And then he went on the Emmys and did this amazing tribute. And, it's just a weird thing that we had to deal with. I don't know what else to say.
Yeah, but in that particular case, we had both an episode like that, and then we also had an episode that concerned a funeral, and both episodes were kind of out the door that day. You know what I mean? And not, like, no fault to anybody. I mean, it was clear to all of us you can't do those. So
Let's bring it back up a notch.
I don't want to end on that note.
We're going to spin some tunes for a minute.
Last
also,
question.
wars in Africa, terrible.
Last question. Someone.
Anybody got any questions about ISIS or Iraq?
No, please. Go ahead in second row.
I was wondering whose idea was it to put that 1600 pen poster in Josh's?
Somebody really brilliant. I don't know who. I don't know. It's really funny.
You're right. It's never not hilarious.
It plays a huge role in an upcoming episode too, and it's really, really funny. And yeah, I mean, God bless. Like, he is a guy who he has been at the forefront of, like, make fun of 1600 pen all you want, which is an example of the sort of courageousness, for lack of a better word, that these guys approach this. I mean, most people in Hollywood want to never acknowledge their lesser work, and Josh is like, no, if we're going to do it, let's make fun of everything, the good and the bad.
Yeah, and that was sort of baked into the cake from the beginning. I mean, one of the first things we talked about was when he was talking about his character in the show. He was like, "Oh yeah, and definitely my character should be obsessed with the idea that 1600 pen is an
It was like a
undiscovered-"
cult hit, yeah.
Exactly.
And we have a thing where he's like, I already spent all the season 2 money, and I, who play his agent, I'm like, there was no season 2.
Well, we'll have to end it there. Well, thank you guys so much for coming. This was fantastic. Thank you guys. Thanks.